All right, folks, we have some very ominous breaking news. The Supreme Court just gave Donald Trump a massive victory in his campaign to overturn constitutionally protected birthright citizenship. And as we speak, both Trump and Attorney General Pam Bondi are taking a disturbing victory lap at the White House, indicating how they intend to advance their entire agenda with this ruling, which limits the ability of the judiciary to check them. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we've got an article to read and several clips to look at, but we're going to start with Trump's victory lap in these two clips, starting with this one.
Thanks for this decision, and thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with numerous policies that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis. And some of the cases we're talking about would be ending birthright citizenship, which now comes to the fore. That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation. This was, in fact, it was the same date, the exact same date, the end of the Civil War. It was meant for the babies of slaves, and it's so clean and so obvious. But this lets us go there and finally win that case, because hundreds of thousands of people are pouring into our country under birthright citizenship, and it wasn't meant for that reason. It was meant for the babies of slaves.
So, got another clip here, and then we'll look at an article from Democracy Docket describing this particular case as we speak. A friend of the show, Pisco, is on his live stream as we speak, reviewing the actual opinion. We may consult with him and collaborate with him in a separate video, but here's another clip from Donald Trump, again taking a victory lap and indicating how he intends to use this ruling, which limits the ability of the judiciary to check Trump, in a whole host of other policy areas, not just trying to end birthright citizenship.
So thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with these numerous policies and those that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis, including birthright citizenship, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee resettlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgeries, and numerous other priorities of the American people. We have so many of them. I have a whole list. I'm not going to bore you, and I'm going to have Pam get up and say a few words, but there's really, she can talk as long as she wants, because this is a very important decision. This is a decision that covers a tremendous amount of territory. But I want to just thank, again, the Supreme Court for this ruling. It's a giant. It's a giant. And they should be very proud, and our country should be very proud of the Supreme Court today.
So there you go. That's part of the victory lap to kind of whet your appetite. We're going to look at Democracy Docket's description. This is a website run by celebrated lawyer Mark Elias, who has been a powerhouse for the Democratic Party's ability to try to successfully stop Donald Trump for years now. Years. He is loathed by MAGA for his efficacy. He has a write-up about this decision. Then we've got some other clips to play because, again, this gets into really disturbing stuff. SCOTUS limits federal judges' ability to block executive actions nationwide. Let's take a look here. In a sweeping ruling, the Supreme Court limited the ability of federal judges to block executive actions throughout the country through nationwide injunctions, greatly affecting how parties seek judicial relief going forward. In the court's 6-3 ruling Friday, with all 6 GOP-appointed justices in the majority, deals a significant blow to legal challenges against Donald Trump's extreme executive orders and other actions, many of which have been blocked or temporarily put on hold through nationwide injunctions. The ruling, quote, is an existential threat to rule of law, said Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who was appointed by President Biden, in the dissent. Nationwide or universal injunctions prevent the government from enforcing a law, regulation, or policy across the entire U.S., not just against the specific parties involved in the lawsuit, and not just in the districts where they're issued. In a majority opinion written by Justice Amy Coney Barrett, the court wrote that nationwide injunctions, quote, likely exceed the equitable authority that Congress has given to federal courts. Quote, the bottom line, the universal injunction was conspicuously non-existent for most of our nation's history, Barrett wrote. Friday's decision over Trump's executive order aiming to deny citizenship to children who are born on U.S. soil to parents who are in the country illegally and temporarily. His order directly challenged the 14th Amendment, which states that everyone born on U.S. territory is a citizen, regardless of their descent. The court's ruling does not address the underlying constitutionality and merits of Trump's order. It instead stayed nationwide injunctions issued by federal judges in Maryland, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. So, in other words, this does not rule that Donald Trump's executive order banning birthright citizenship, again, a constitutionally protected right, that it is lawful, that he has the right to do so. It kind of sidesteps that because the issue was not directly brought up by the government when they appealed to the Supreme Court, right? So what this does is it just simply removes roadblocks allowing Trump to try to implement this order, okay? However, the court specified that Trump's order could take effect in 30 days. So his executive order banning birthright citizenship and ordering the federal government to take those sorts of according steps, they're giving them a green light. Hey, I don't know if what you're doing is constitutional or unconstitutional, but the thing that blocked you from implementing it, we are deciding it is unconstitutional. So in 30 days, you can go ahead and take your shot. Shoot your shot, King. The lower court orders prevented federal agencies from carrying out Trump's birthright citizenship order anywhere in the country. The Justice Department challenged the orders by asking the Supreme Court in an emergency application whether judges can grant relief that applies to parties who are not litigating before them. The court said the orders now only apply to the plaintiffs who sued. Okay, so again, the nationwide injunctions have been limited specifically to the very people, the named people, the individuals who brought the suit in the first place. Their idea is, okay, so if you are able to make it to court and sue over birthright citizenship, challenge the government's ability to block birthright citizenship, and a judge grants you relief, then Trump can't do anything. He can't touch you. You're good. You're good. It applies. But as the dissent notes and as other people who criticize nationwide injunctions have noted, in this particular case, it makes it virtually impossible that everyone whom this order targets will be granted relief, right? Because if it's a constitutional right and your constitutional right is being violated and you have an obligation to sue in literally every single instance, it creates a patchwork effect which could allow people's constitutional rights to be violated potentially without redress. Imagine if you're deported because Donald Trump says birthright citizenship doesn't apply, and you're deported before you can sue and be granted relief, assuming you're granted relief in the first place, right? That's the risk. Trump in a statement called the ruling, quote, a giant win, which it is for him. Quote, even birthright citizenship hoax has been indirectly hit hard. It had to do with the babies of slaves. Same year, not the scamming of our immigration process. Congratulations to Attorney General Pam Bondi, Solicitor General John Sauer, and the entire DOJ. Legal experts noted that the ruling will have a cascading effect on other legal challenges to Trump's policies that have involved universal injunctions, such as his efforts to fire mass federal workers, cut diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, and change federal research grant standards. Since January, federal judges have issued at least 25 universal injunctions in challenges to Trump policies, according to the Congressional Research Service. It's unclear how widespread relief from a potentially unconstitutional act by the government will now be sought in light of the court's decision. The ruling may lead to an increase in court cases throughout the country as people seek the same relief in each circuit court. Justice Brett Kavanaugh suggested that plaintiffs could pursue relief under class action lawsuits or ask courts to set aside new agency rules under the Administrative Procedure Act. The court left open the possibility of nationwide relief in lawsuits brought by state governments. Quote, the gamesmanship in this request is apparent, and the government makes no attempt to hide it, Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote in a dissent joined by Justices Elena Kagan and Jackson. Quote, yet shamefully, the court plays along. Sotomayor added that the ruling, quote, disregards basic principles of equity as well as the long history of injunctive relief granted to non-parties, end quote. Sotomayor notably did not include the traditional, quote, respectfully to conclude in her dissent. She's throwing some shade there. In a separate dissenting opinion, Jackson wrote that the court's decision poses, quote, an existential threat to rule of law by allowing the executive branch to, quote, violate the Constitution with respect to anyone who has not yet sued. Again, something I referenced earlier. Quote, it's important to recognize that the executive's bid to vanquish so-called universal injunctions is, at bottom, a request for this court's permission to engage in unlawful behavior, Jackson added. In a rare move, the Supreme Court held oral arguments on the DOJ's application in May. Normally, emergency applications are resolved through unsigned orders with limited briefing and no oral argument. Nationwide injunctions have grown more common over recent decades and have been sought by both liberal and conservatives to halt the policies of presidents of both parties. Legal experts across the ideological spectrum have expressed concerns about the use of nationwide injunctions, saying they promote forum shopping and politicization of the judiciary. Other experts say they're necessary in rare cases to protect civil liberties throughout the country and avoid a patchwork of conflicting judicial rulings. pretty good points. I will say before we play some, and we have other clips to play to be sure, that I'm conflicted on this because President Biden's agenda was seriously undermined by nationwide injunctions issued, particularly out of Amarillo, Texas, by a Trump-appointed Judge Kaczmarek, and it was a pain in the ass. One single judge in one single Trump-friendly district was able to grind so much of the Biden administration's agenda to a halt. So this has absolutely been employed against Democratic presidents, excuse me. It's also being employed against Trump. Now, people against Trump would argue, myself included, that, well, much of this these are being granted not just by a single conservative district, but rather, in the case of Biden, right, it was somebody of the opposite political and philosophical, ideology, right? It was a conservative judge, imposing a nationwide injunction against a Democratic president. But in the Trump's case, it's not just liberal judges, imposing nationwide injunctions against him. Very often, it's conservative judges as well. As Professor Kate Shaw of Strict Scrutiny pointed out when she testified before Congress, in the case of Trump, it may just be that he is, extraordinarily unlawful, and that's why he's getting smacked down in not just liberal courts, but conservative courts as well. Food for thought. But let's get to the rest of the press conference. Again, pretty unhinged, especially from our very unhinged Attorney General Pam Bondi. Here's a clip.
Thank you for fighting for all Americans. Americans are finally getting what they voted for. No longer will we have rogue judges striking down President Trump's policies across the entire nation. No longer. Today, in the 6-3 opinion, Justice Barrett correctly holds that the district court lacks authority to enter nationwide or universal injunctions. These lawless injunctions gave relief to everyone in the world instead of the parties before the court. As the Supreme Court held today, they turned district courts into the imperial judiciary. Active liberal judges have used these injunctions to block virtually all of President Trump's policies. To put this in perspective, there are 94 federal judicial districts. 5 of those districts throughout this country held 35 of the nationwide injunctions. Think about that. 94 districts. And 35 out of the 40 opinions with nationwide injunctions came from 5 liberal districts.
Yeah, but he was also smacked down again by conservative judges, and that means 2/3 of the nationwide injunctions operated outside those districts. And again, there's no question that forum shopping is a problem. As a matter of fact, under President Biden, Democrats attempted to pass laws that would limit forum shopping by liberals and conservatives. And the Republicans chose not to support it because they wanted to use forum shopping against Democratic presidents, and now Republican presidents, those same Republicans are clutching their pearls saying, well, we want to be able to use it against you, but you can't use it against us. Here's another clip.
Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Attorney General. So as you know, the Supreme Court did not rule on the underlying constitutionality of the president's birthright citizenship order. So what is the plan now? Are you going to try to implement the EO just in states where there isn't a legal challenge?
Yes, so birthright citizenship will be decided in October in the next session by the Supreme Court, unless it comes down in the next few minutes. I guess it could come down. I think they're still deliberating right now on some cases. As you heard, we just got transgender books, which is a huge win. But most likely, that will be decided in October in the next session. However, it indirectly impacts us because, as you correctly pointed out, if there's a birthright citizenship case in Oregon, it will only affect the plaintiff in Oregon, not the entire.
So again, that's Bondi talking about the possibility that the Supreme Court will rule for Trump and birthright citizenship on the merits in October. And again, I wouldn't put it past this court to rule in his favor, unfortunately, even though the Constitution is pretty clear. Trump takes another question.
Mr. President, what would you say to Americans who fear that this is more and more concentration of power in the White House and the executive?
Well, this really brings back the Constitution. This is what it's all about, and this is really the opposite of that. I mean, the question is fine, but it's the opposite. The Constitution has been brought back.
Mr. President,
the same Constitution that in 2023 Donald Trump proposed terminating in order to remove President Biden from power and put Trump back in power. All right, here's another clip.
Mr. President, what would you say to Americans who fear that this is more and more concentration of power in the White House? And
I don't know why that clip played second time. Oh, that's why at the end.
Thank you so much, President Trump. Illegal crossings in the border are zero now.
Zero. Does everyone hear that? Zero. Trump 2028.
Do you intend, President Trump?
Who's that guy?
On a related subject, many Democrats have said that they are...
He's working the cameras.
Yes, that's pretty disturbing that Trump is again flirting with the idea of an unconstitutional third term. The same constitution that he's appealing to here. So we've got some other clips as well, starting with this one.
That's much more important than anything that we invest.
You know what? This particular clip, that's about his crypto thing. I'm going to save that for a separate video because that's too important to just throw in here. Here's another clip related to this Supreme Court ruling.
Today marked the 2,711th arrest in our country of TDA members, just TDA. Everyone in this room agrees they are one of the most violent criminal organizations in the world. And the Biden administration let them walk into our country for the last 4 years. 2,711 of them today have been arrested in our country. That is the priority of Donald Trump. That is the priority of this country, of Homeland Security, of all of our lawyers, of FBI. That's the priority. That will be discussed in October when the Supreme Court hopefully rules in our favor, and we're very confident of that. But you should all feel safer now that President Trump can deport all of these gangs, and not one district court judge can think they're an emperor over this administration.
She is so profoundly unhinged. I mean, listening to her speak is truly a challenge. Listen, nobody takes issue. The polling on this is pretty clear. Deport violent criminals? Yes, please. But you need to observe due process. You just need to. That's the challenge here. And you're deporting a shit ton of people who are nonviolent as well. So this is the problem. Yes, deporting violent, undocumented immigrants is good. But you have to observe due process, and that's what Attorney General Pam Bondi just doesn't seem to recognize. But there you have it, folks. I mean, listen, this is, again, a massive victory for Trump. It doesn't mean that the Supreme Court will necessarily rule in his favor when the actual merits of Trump's executive order to overturn birthright citizenship go before them. It's possible that they rule in favor of him here and rule against him later on. But in the short term, it will allow him to continue his program, to continue his effort to effectively, contradict and effectively end birthright citizenship with executive order conduct and executive branch conduct. And it's a massive victory for Trump. And I guess the only silver lining is that if we ever get back into power, if Democrats are ever able to get back into power, at least on paper, at least in theory, nationwide injunctions blocking Democratic presidents will be severely limited as well. But wouldn't put it past the court to say, actually, no, this doesn't apply to Democrats. You can impose nationwide injunctions against them, right? In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.